1 month before the death, I discovered that the person I had spent half my life with had been cheating on me with his first love for 30 years. When I was in labor, he suddenly disappeared. It turns out, he had gone to his first love's house. They had another home together in a different city. They had even made a pact that if either of them became widowed in this life, they would find their way back to each other. As I stared at the medical report in my hand, was I supposed to just let them have their wish? I couldn't accept it. Chapter 01. When I found those items, I was at home cleaning up. My husband, Diego, always had a locked safe where he kept important documents. But today, for some reason, the lock on the safe was open. I opened the door of the safe, and after seeing what was inside, I couldn't stay calm any longer. The first thing I saw was a jade pendant. The jade was smooth and glossy, as if someone had handled it frequently. It hung from a red string. The color was mediocre, and attached to it was a small note. The edges of the note were yellowed and damaged, and the handwriting, Diego's handwriting, was already a bit faded, with no colorful wings to fly in harmony. Yet our hearts are attuned as one. Pledged to Selena on November 14, 1995. My heart clenched tightly. November 14th was my son's birthday. That day, I had been in labor for 18 hours. But when I came out, Diego was nowhere to be found. My mother-in-law had said he was called away to school on short notice. But little did I know, while I was suffering in labor, he was with his first love. Wrapped up in passion, the thought of this made my heart sink. I emptied the entire contents of the safe in one go, examining every item closely. Diego and I married in 1993, and this year marks 31 years together. Selena was Diego's first love, the daughter of his mentor. The two were indeed each other's first love during their school years. But Diego's mentor didn't think they were a good match and forced them to break up. The safe held a mix of old and new things. There were plane tickets and high-speed train tickets from various trips across the country, all with the names Diego and Selena on them, spanning from the late 1990s to as recent as last year. The oldest items were love poems from their student days. And the newest item? A gas safety notice. The address was in a neighboring city, with Selena listed as the owner. It stated that the gas needed a regular safety inspection and urged immediate contact with a technician. I dialed the number on the notice. "Hello?" A young man's voice answered. "Hello, young man. I'm the owner of first floor, Unit 3, Building 7 of Xinhuajiayuan. Selena." I began to recite the address on the notice but was cut off before I could finish. "Ma'am? Didn't your husband schedule the inspection for this Saturday?" He replied. Chapter 02. The phone rang. It was my son, Marco. "Mom, Lucas wants to have spicy clams and cola chicken wings today. Make extra this time. Last time there wasn't enough." I smiled and agreed. Then the phone was handed over to my daughter-in-law. "Mom, it's Roxana. Lucas has his school opening ceremony tomorrow. Did you wash his uniform? We won't be able to make it back in time. Oh, and don't forget to polish the shoes on the rack too." "Thanks, Mom." With that, she hurriedly hung up, leaving me staring at the phone, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. I hadn't even had the chance to say sure. I set the phone down and looked at the hospital report in my hand, sitting in a daze for the entire afternoon. Late-stage breast cancer. Those few words cut through my nerves like a knife, making it hard for me to breathe. And the things I discovered this afternoon only made me question what I've been living for. I married Diego at 22, and my life has been nothing but a whirlwind of busy days. Rushed into marriage, rushed into motherhood, caring for the family, tending to my parents-in-laws. After our son was born, the long days stretched on school runs, helping him marry and settle down. When my grandson was born, I kept running around, tirelessly caring for him. 30 years of marriage, and not a single day was spent in leisure. Now, with not much time left, I just want to live for myself. I put away the small items I had found, taking out only the jade pendant, and sat quietly, waiting for my husband to return home. Before long, I heard the familiar sound of keys turning in the lock. Diego was back. He set down his book and glanced at the empty dinner table, frowning. "No dinner tonight? If I don't cook, what are we supposed to eat? Air?" He began changing out of his clothes. Make sure to wash and iron these tonight. I have to attend a forum in the neighboring city tomorrow. He was going to see Selena. Hearing this, I looked up and stared at him, placing the jade pendant in front of him. Are you really going to a forum? Diego froze when he saw the pendant, his face turning red, then white, a whirlwind of expressions. Realizing what had happened, he glared at me furiously. Did you go through my things? Who gave you permission to snoop through my things? Do you think you deserve to touch Selena's things? In a fit of rage, he stormed over and slapped me across the face, snatching the pendant from my hand. My cheek burned with pain, and the intense sting made me cough uncontrollably. I struggled through my dizziness and managed to push out a few words. Let's get a divorce. Diego stared at me in disbelief, as if he had just heard a joke. We're in our 50s and 60s, why divorce now? Do you want to be a laughingstock? This is all in the past. Why do you need to stir things up and make it public knowledge? Chapter 03. I didn't say a word. I quietly packed my things. Diego watched me as I gathered my belongings but didn't stop me. He just stared at me coldly. As I was about to leave, Diego angrily threw the teapot in his hand, smashing it in front of me. I've provided you with food and comfort all these years, and at your age, you're making a fool of yourself like this? Fine, leave. Let's see how good your life will be after the divorce. I gritted my teeth, enduring the pain that came from my late-stage cancer. My head was pounding, but I said nothing as I dragged my luggage out the door. After so many years, I found myself standing in front of the small apartment my parents had fully paid for before my marriage. Feeling like I had lived a whole other life since then, it felt as if living here was something from another lifetime. Yes, after 31 years of marriage, I hadn't brought much value to my in-laws. Most of my dowry had been sold off to help with household expenses, and all that remained was the small apartment that had been left untouched for years. Because of its remote location, it never fetched a good price on the market. Ironically, it became the last piece of property that truly belonged to me. It was a modest 2-bedroom apartment, already cluttered with so many old items that its original appearance was hard to recognize. I spent an entire day cleaning up the space, making it barely livable. The next day, I contacted a real estate agent and listed the apartment at 10% below the market price. 2 days passed, and instead of hearing from Diego, the person who showed up at my door was my son, Marco. Marco arrived while I was taking a nap. My legs aren't as strong as they used to be, so I hurried as best I could to open the door. Mom, what are you doing? Why did you take so long to answer the door? As soon as I opened the door, Marco began complaining about how long he had been knocking. He must have found this place after hearing something from Diego. I invited him in with a smile, saying, I was taking a nap. What brings you here? The small apartment still had a musty smell from years of disuse. Marco wrinkled his nose in disgust as he glanced around, then turned back to look at me. Mom, come back home. It's not right for you to be living here all alone. What if something happens to you? How do you expect us to feel at ease? And besides, Lucas hasn't seen his grandma lately. He's been crying, asking for you to take him to school. I remained silent, my thoughts rushing like a tidal wave. Hearing Marco bring up Lucas just made me want to laugh. He's just like his father. Whenever they feel guilty, they use the child as a shield or a stepping stone. When Marco saw that I wasn't responding, his patience quickly ran out, and his tone turned sour as he continued to unload on me. I heard about Aunt Selena from Dad. It's not what you think at all. Aunt Selena is an intelligent, refined woman who has dedicated her entire life to her academic pursuits. She's a great person, and besides, what man doesn't have a close female confidant? It's one of life's great fortunes. You and Dad have been together all these years, haven't you? Mom, just be more generous. Don't get hung up on these little romantic squabbles. As Marco spoke those words, I quietly looked up at my good son. For 30 years, I had raised not a son, but an enemy. Chapter 04. After throwing Marco out of the small apartment, I became more determined than ever. I found a lawyer specializing in divorce cases and immediately drew up a will. First, the will made it clear that upon my death, none of my assets would be inherited by anyone. Everything would be donated to charity. Next, I handed the lawyer copies of the plane tickets, correspondence, and the gas safety notice I had taken from Diego's safe. We were going to file for divorce, claiming Diego as the party at fault, and I would demand that he leave the marriage with nothing. By the time all of this was handled, it was already evening. After the lawyer left, a wave of pain crashed over me. My headache intensified, my vision blurred, and the room spun. Vomit, mixed with blood, spewed from my mouth. Tears streamed down my face, not because of the physical pain, but because of the emotional torment that accompanied it. Half of my life had passed, and I realized that everything I had lived was nothing but an illusion. Ring, ring, it was the real estate agent. I hurriedly wiped away my tears, cleared my throat, and answered the phone. The small apartment had sold. The 10% below market price had certainly been tempting. The buyer had already signed the contract, and I was to sign later that day. In about 7 business days, I would receive the full payment. After hearing this, I began to set my travel plans in motion. To be honest, when I saw those plane tickets that Diego and Selena had collected, apart from the bitterness, I couldn't help but feel a sense of envy. For the past 30 years, we had lived completely different lives. Their life was poetic, full of freedom and ease. My life, on the other hand, was consumed by trivialities, tightly confined within a narrow space where I could hardly breathe. Chapter 05. Shortly after boarding the train to Lhasa, I received a call from the hospital. "Ma'am, your current condition does not allow for travel. Many of your health indicators are far from normal, and you are at risk of fainting at any time. Please come to the hospital for treatment immediately." The call was from a young nurse, probably around the same age as my son. I softly reassured her, telling her I would check into the hospital later, but that I had more important things to do right now. "Ma'am, what could possibly be more important than your health? If you don't check in within 3 days, I will inform your family of your condition." The disbelief in her voice was palpable. It was ironic that a stranger was more concerned about my well-being than my own flesh and blood. The train sped on, passing rivers, mountains, lakes, and oceans, much like my rushed life over the years. I had been so tense and hurried that I forgot to appreciate the scenery along the way. When I finally saw the Tangula Mountains and the Tibetan antelope from the train, I couldn't care less about the slight shortness of breath caused by mild altitude sickness. I snapped countless photos and posted them on my social media, captioning them with "a moment of freedom." Before long, a few people had liked and commented on my post. Most praised the beautiful scenery and left likes. Among the comments was one from Diego. "Tibet is beautiful. You're free now, Rose." No matter the situation, he always managed to keep up appearances in public. My daughter-in-law quietly liked the post, and right after, my son commented, "Mom, you may be free, but we're exhausted." Crying. Ring, ring. I glanced at my phone. It was Marco calling. "Hello? What's going on, son?" I hadn't expected the call to turn into a barrage of complaints. "Mom, how could you just go off to Tibet without telling us? You're happy now. But do you know what Roxana and I are going through? We're exhausted. After work, we have to pick up the kid, cook, clean the house. There's too much to do. The house is a complete mess. Mom, how could you be so selfish?" Chapter 06. I didn't respond to Marco's accusations. I simply hung up the phone. After I hung up, Marco, not satisfied, kept calling over and over. I turned off my phone entirely. At this point in life, after everything, I had come to realize many things. There was nothing I couldn't let go of anymore. Not even the family ties I once thought were as thick as blood. The delayed effects of altitude sickness and the stabbing pain in my body kept me awake. But the moment I set foot in Lhasa, it felt as if the vast, healing landscape had washed away much of my suffering. I had hired a local guide with a car to take me on a journey, to experience the gifts of nature and the profound cultural heritage of this place. In the countdown of life, seeing these sights, knowing that if I didn't see them now, I never would, felt worth it. On the 6th day of the trip, I fainted. I was rushed to a local hospital in Lhasa, where I explained my condition to the doctor. My health indicators had worsened. My head throbbed as if it were splitting open. and the pain in my body was like a blade repeatedly cutting into my wounds, unbearable. My God! You've put your body through so much. It can't take it anymore. I must notify your family immediately. You need to start treatment at once. The doctor asked for my family's phone number from the hospital room. I could faintly hear him talking on the phone outside, repeating over and over. It's true, I'm not lying to you. Knowing Diego and Marco, they would likely think it was a scam since I'd always been in good health. I struggled to sit up, but my body had no strength left. My mouth was parched, my lips cracked and dry. I licked them, and my hand trembled as I reached out to pour myself a glass of water. But I was too weak. I couldn't even reach the cup before I had to stop. Let me help you. Don't move. A thin, middle-aged man stepped forward, gently taking the kettle from me. He looked to be in his 50s, with a slightly hunched back. His hair and beard were tinged with gray, and he moved slowly. He wore a pair of reading glasses perched on the bridge of his nose. After pouring the water, he turned toward me and smiled softly, holding a cup of warm water as he approached. Just like 30 years ago. It's been a long time. Amanda. Chapter 07. Amanda. After you left, they all said you wouldn't come back, but I didn't believe them. I held on to the letter you left me, and I waited for 10 years. It was Leo, my first love, whom I met during my time as a young educated youth sent to the countryside. As Leo spoke, he pulled out a letter from the neighboring room. Its paper yellowed and the handwriting faded. I took the letter, my heart trembling as I touched this farewell note. Sealed away for 30 years. I came to find you later, but they stopped me at the gates of your compound. They wouldn't let me in. I waited for 3 days, and from a distance, I saw you with your son. You looked happy, so I left. When I came back from the countryside, I had excitedly told my parents all about Leo, thinking it would be the start of a happily ever after. But instead, what greeted me was a locked door, a door that locked away my 30 years. I closed my eyes, trying to control my emotions, but I couldn't stop the tears from welling up. Leo quickly spoke up. I know, I heard from the neighbors back then. You were locked away by your family and couldn't come find me. Leo sat quietly by the window of my hospital room, his head lowered, his face, weathered by the years, was thin and worn. He continued to speak softly. Later, I headed west and ended up here. I've been doing volunteer work, watching the scenery, and staying here for all these years. We once dreamed of the vastness of Lhasa. I never thought that after 20 years, I'd finally meet you again. He looked at me with a steady gaze. I sighed deeply, but I don't have much time left. Maybe I'll live another half month? A month? I don't know. Isn't it ironic? The person who spent half a lifetime with me has been in love with someone else for 30 years, and I never realized. Now, I just want to live for myself. Leo hesitated for a long time, then finally took my hand. Then how lucky am I to be with you from the beginning of your life to the end. Chapter 08. After meeting Leo in the hospital in Lhasa, my spirits lifted considerably. Leo encouraged me to go back to a first-tier city to receive more professional treatment. But my body was no longer strong enough to endure the trip. Once chemotherapy began, my health deteriorated rapidly. I started losing large clumps of hair, and my body was racked with uncontrollable bouts of vomiting. Sometimes, I would wake in the middle of the night with my mouth and tongue so dry they felt like they were covered in a hard shell. My chest felt like it was stuffed with cotton, making it hard to breathe. During this time, Diego called me once, but it wasn't out of concern. Amanda, a doctor from Lhasa, called me, saying you were hospitalized there. Is it true? The pain spread through me like fine sand, creeping slowly, but I bit back the agony and managed to grunt in acknowledgement. Ha, Diego sneered on the other end of the line. Amanda, we're in our 50s and 60s. Stop pretending. I know what you're trying to do, force me to cut ties with Selena, but that's never going to happen. You better hope your cancer is real. Amanda, just go ahead and die over there. The phone abruptly cut off. I stared out at the gloomy sky, feeling a deep, bone-chilling coldness inside. The room was silent, and Leo had heard everything. I gave a bitter laugh, looked at him, and briefly recounted the situation. He paused, his face complex with emotions as he came over and took my hand. Amanda, let me help you. I'm pretty good at writing. I'll help you write a letter of anguish. There's no sense in bearing all this suffering in silence. Sometimes I was lucid. Sometimes I drifted in and out of consciousness. With my disjointed narration, Leo took 5 days to finish the letter. He truly had a gift for writing. The letter didn't just expose Diego and Selena's illicit affair, but also detailed all of Diego's corrupt deeds over the years, embezzling student subsidies and misusing research funds. Among other things, it was an 8,000-word masterpiece, meticulously outlining all his wrongdoings. We spent another 3 days typing it all up and uploading it online. One anguished letter, a cry for justice. We sent it to Diego's university's disciplinary committee and simultaneously posted it on my social media and TikTok. Chapter 09. The letter of anguish caused an uproar. The university leadership could suppress the formal complaint, but they couldn't contain the flood of outrage on the internet. I knew exactly what Diego had been planning. He and Selena had promised each other that once their respective spouses passed away, they would overcome all obstacles and be together again. If I died, Diego would be free to marry Selena in a grand ceremony. They'd probably even look back on the past decades as lovers separated by fate. For them, it would be soulmates finally reunited. But what about my 30 years? 30 years, fleeting like a white horse passing by, leaving no trace on my life. Overnight, both the university forum and the broader internet were flooded with condemnation. Internet sleuths, using the gas safety inspection notice number we posted, tracked down Diego and Selena's secret hideaway. Angry netizens vented their fury by throwing manure at their door and leaving funeral wreaths. Selena's research and Diego's external lectures were immediately suspended by the university. They were also instructed not to respond to any public comments online, as any reaction at this point would only add fuel to the fire of this internet frenzy. Diego was swiftly forced into honorary retirement with a formal notice. All his research funds were confiscated, and he was ordered to repay the student subsidies he had withheld over the years. In an instant, Diego became notorious, shunned by everyone. Selena, in comparison, faced much less severe consequences. After all, her fault lay mainly in having an illicit relationship. The public condemnation she received was more on moral grounds than anything else. However, for someone like Selena, who had spent her entire life cultivating the image of an intellectual woman, it was ultimately her reputation that was destroyed by a man. This scandal stirred a great deal of noise, and my phone, along with my WeChat, was flooded with messages. Mom, have you lost your mind? Now people from the internet are coming to our house. I can't take it anymore. Roxana and I are being pointed at every day at work. And Lucas is coming home crying because his classmates won't play with him. Even Diego couldn't resist sending a message. Is this what you wanted? Even if the world never recognizes me and Selena, we'll be reunited in the afterlife. Selena and I will love each other for an eternity. After reading his message, I couldn't help but laugh. I turned around and posted a new status on my WeChat Moments. This WeChat no longer accepts any messages. If you have something to say, please contact my lawyer. Chapter 10. In the second month of my stay in Lhasa, it snowed. This winter's snowfall was unusually heavy, and the wind swept the snowflakes across the frozen lake in swirling patterns. Inside, it was quiet and warm. The snow on the windowsill started to melt from the indoor heat, leaving winding streaks on the wall. My body continued to deteriorate. After my 5th round of chemotherapy, I had already received 3 critical condition notices. The pain, which had once been confined to a small part of my body, now spread to every corner. Curled up in the hospital bed, I was surrounded by countless tubes and monitoring equipment. Each breath was weak and shallow, accompanied by faint moans of pain. Gathering all my strength, I asked Leo in agony, "Am I going to die?" Leo shook his head furiously, but immediately turned his back to me, his shoulders trembling. He had cared for me for 2 months, and his once thin frame had grown even more frail. His hair had turned significantly grayer. I thought back to a time long ago when we leaned on each other during an illness. Back then, I had fallen into a ravine, and Leo, trying to save me, had broken his leg. I had taken care of him. At that time, our hair was still dark, and our eyes were filled with endless love and longing for each other. But now, 30 years later, all that was left was regret and sorrow. I looked at Leo's trembling back. My eyes blurred with tears. Leo, if there's a next life, let's meet earlier. I won't care about my parents. I won't care about the world's judgment. When we meet, we won't be separated again, okay? In the next life, we'll be born in Lhasa. We'll watch the sunrise over the golden mountains. We'll see the endless grasslands. We'll watch the wind, the cattle, and the sheep. Leo turned around, nodding in agreement, but he kept looking at my pale, withered face, as if he wanted to imprint me into his bones. Chapter 11. I struggled through these months, managing to hold on for 3 months in Lhasa. It was rare for Leo to offer to take me outside for a walk. The cold wind was fierce, and as soon as I felt its chill, I shivered. Leo looked at me with concern. Maybe we should go back inside? I shook my head and tugged at Leo's coat, signaling that I wanted to keep moving forward. The snow fell in thick, feather-like flakes, drifting down like goose feathers. I reached out with trembling hands to catch the falling snow. The fine snow, like grains of salt, melted instantly in my palm, leaving no trace, but the cold seeped deeper with every flake. I pulled my coat tighter around me, but no matter how tightly I wrapped it, the cold seemed to pierce through, making me shiver uncontrollably. I began to cough violently. Leo, flustered, hurriedly took off his military coat and wrapped it tightly around me, then quickly turned the wheelchair and started pushing me back toward the hospital. Just as I was about to cough up my lungs, I heard a clattering sound next to me, like things being dropped to the ground. I frowned and turned to look. It was my son, Marco, whom I hadn't seen in 3 months. Marco stood there, eyes wide with shock, frozen in disbelief at what he was witnessing. The bag in his hand slipped and fell to the floor. Suddenly, as if waking from a daze, Marco ran toward me. Mom? Mom, is that really you? He rushed to my side, panic in his voice. It's only been 2 months. How did you end up like this? Leo, worried that Marco might accidentally hurt me in his haste, quickly pulled him back. Wait, I need to get her back to her room. Your mother is not feeling well right now. Marco paused, looking stunned, and then he glared at Leo. Who are you? I struggled to suppress my cough, my voice weak as a thread. Call him Uncle Leo. Marco sneered at my words. Mom, you've been here in Lhasa all this time with this random man? At your age, don't you have any shame? Marco's voice was so loud that people in the hospital began to turn and look at us. More and more eyes were on us, and I found it harder and harder to breathe. Sensing something was wrong, a nurse rushed over, scolding Marco for yelling, and helped push me back to the room. From a distance, lying on the bed, I could hear the nurse scolding Marco outside the room, though I couldn't catch every word. So, you're Amanda's son? Why are you only here now? Marco stammered in response. Yes, I am. The nurse, not holding back, snapped at him. Treating your dying mother like this. She raised you for nothing. Marco's head buzzed as the nurse's words hit him. Dying? The nurse looked at him as if he were a fool, tapping the medical report in her hand. Your mother has late-stage breast cancer. Didn't you know? Chapter 12. Marco started showing up every day, sitting outside the room. He wanted to come in to be with me, but I didn't want to see him. Every time I saw him, I felt like I was suffocating, and my vitals would take a sharp turn for the worse. Over time, the nurses simply stopped letting him into my room. I could feel my time running out. I could no longer eat anything. Even the 4 drips were useless. My entire arm was covered with puncture marks from all the needles, and I had grown even thinner. The pain from chemotherapy haunted me every night, keeping me awake until dawn. I knew it was time for me to leave. Leo is probably the only person I trust now. I had a call with my lawyer, and the divorce ruling finally came through. Diego didn't leave the marriage with nothing, as it's hard to make such a ruling in cases like ours. But most of the family assets were awarded to me, including the house they're living in now. Diego was only left with 300,000 yuan. After the ruling, I updated my will, instructing Leo to sell the house after I passed. Half of the proceeds should be donated, and the other half would be left for Leo's retirement. I asked Leo to arrange a flight for my lawyer, so he could come to Lesaw and be ready to reveal the will after my death. But just at that moment, I saw a reflection in the glass window of my hospital room. It was Diego. It was the first time I had seen him since I left 3 months ago. Diego had aged significantly. His eyebrows, beard, and the hair peeking out from under his hat had all turned white. He was still wearing the shirt I bought him years ago, but it was wrinkled and far from the neat appearance he used to have. With a hunched back, Diego took slow, shuffling steps toward me. I closed my eyes, refusing to look at him. Leo, noticing the tension, quietly found an excuse to leave the room. After all the ups and downs, it felt like a dream in the end. The suppressed anger and hatred I had buried deep within me slowly began to rise. Leave, I said softly. I don't want to see you. Diego's face turned pale, and he stammered, Amanda, I wronged you, but now, I have nothing left either. I've lost everything, just like you. A bitter smile formed on my lips as my eyelids grew heavier, and my breathing became shallower. With all the strength I could muster, I sighed deeply and said, Leave. Diego's face drained of color as he stared at me in disbelief. Stumbling, he ran out, calling for a doctor. Leo rushed back in. His steps hurried. He gripped my pale, cold hand tightly, his lips trembling as he choked out, Amanda. Amanda. I tried to sit up to see him one last time, but the searing pain spread through every inch of my body. In that final moment before death, I suddenly felt a deep sense of injustice, but also a sense of relief. I squeezed Leo's hand with all the strength I had left. Every breath was labored and heavy. Promise me, in the next life. My breathing slowed almost to a stop, but I fought to speak softly to Leo. I gently closed my eyes, feeling lighter than I ever had. The light behind the clouds was so beautiful, and I felt like I was getting closer and closer to it.